I think if you are sort of falling into or sharing the idea that it's completely inevitable that Sir Keir Starmer, who one day to the next simply doesn't even know what he believes in, but he'll always go where he thinks it's convenient to go. Look at the things he stood on to become leader of the opposition, which was a radical left platform. Look at the things he's saying now. He'll say whatever it takes.
What was the radical left part of his platform?
Well, of course, he tried to appeal to essentially...
But genuinely, what was the radical left part of his platform that he stood on?
So, I mean, I can't believe I'm going to side with Sophie Ridge on this one. And what was being proposed in the Labour leadership election wasn't radically left-wing. This was just social democracy, exactly what Corbyn was proposing. But Sophie Ridge is flying really close to the sun here by claiming that Corbynism as a political philosophy was indeed the social democratic Nordic model kind of normality that we should expect from a democratic socialist party, quote unquote, in the form of the Labour Party. Which, isn't that broadcasting omerta? Right? Isn't that not like an agreed rule that we only call Corbynism fringe, marked like radical pseudo-communism, as Anne Widdecombe called it? Is this not a tacit admission that if Keir Starmer was standing on, the Corbyn domestic economic platform, that means that by calling it not radical left, you are then implying that that's not what Corbyn stood for either, which is obviously true. So yeah, interesting.
Well, for example,
what's a policy example?
For example, he stood on 10 different pledges, many of which...
But which was radical left?
If you let me answer the question, many of which carried on supporting some of the policies that before him Corbyn had in place. This is a man...
But what's the radical left?
I'm glad that she's pressing him on this because he's doing what has been clearly been built up by the political and media machine to be the easy way of getting out of this, which is by saying that, oh, well, Corbyn supported it, therefore it must be radically left, because Corbyn is radically left. Well, why is he? Well, because he supported the policies. There's this circular argument they've got going on, which intimately ties the idea of Corbynism as being, fringe, outside the Overton window, nonsensical, impractical economic policy, when, as I said, it is just the social democratic Nordic model policies that we do see in countries like Norway and Denmark, for example.
Well, let me explain.
Agenda.
This is a man who sat in the Corbyn shadow cabinet whilst...
And has just kicked him out of the party.
And defended, essentially, therefore, Corbyn's anti-Semitism. He defended Corbyn's attack.
True, it is fine to say it because no one's proposing it anymore. True. Well, just like every journalist at The Guardian now saying, where's Keir Starmer's radicalism? As if they weren't the ones decrying that same radicalism coming from the jam man.
On businesses, and he carried on playing, not on anti-Semitism, but in other areas, to that agenda in his 10-point plan that got him elected, then dumps it.
Then he literally, where has he even touched on policy at all here? His 2 points were, he's similar to Corbyn because those were the pledges are, and also was in Corbyn's shadow cabinet, and B, was still there during anti-Semitism. His only link that he can ever have is nothing around policy. It's around this smear about the radical left being wholly anti-Semitic, which, quite frankly, is ridiculous for any sitting minister who's within the same cabinet as someone who talks about cultural Marxism, conspiracy theories, for example, can say with a straight face. It's ridiculous to me. But again, it just shows how it's just received wisdom for these people. Obviously, Grant Shapps doesn't know anything about politics or anything about economics, because of course he doesn't. He's a conservative. And that just shows you that he can't properly articulate to people why he thinks Corbyn's ideas are indeed radically left. A, because they're not. B, because he doesn't understand what that means. And C, because he knows that if he actually described the policies, people would realise he's being nonsensical and would also realise that it was all a smear. It was all a desire to take reasonable, practical policy that the public do indeed agree with and make it seem as though it cannot ever be implemented, like, for example, nationalising our energy supply, the Inclusive Ownership Fund, a national care service, for example.
And says, no, I'm ready now to lead the country. And again, today in the newspapers, we learned that he has a plan to change the electoral system to go further than was the case, for example, even when we were in the EU. So he seems to want to renegotiate Brexit again. So he wants to open that.
So, I mean, is changing an electoral system to one they have in other countries and have had for other countries for a long time, is that radical left? Is giving votes to EU nationals a radical left-wing proposal? don't think it is, Grant. I don't remember Vladimir Lenin saying, let's grant votes to EU nationals, let's bring the voting age down to 16. Do you remember that? I don't remember that being part of the Bolshevik platform. Do you?
Again.
Just talking about that, actually, because that is one of the things in the newspapers today.
No! Sophy! He's not answered the question! Ask him again! Ask him again. What was the left-wing, the radically left-wing proposals that he stood on? Right, he said the 10 pledges. What's radically left about them? Press him. He's not answered the fucking question. Do your job. It's your job, Sophy, to do this.
Keir Starmer apparently looking at opening up the voting system so that settled migrants, for example, EU citizens who live, work, pay taxes in the UK, could get the vote along with 16 and 17-year-olds. Not something you support.
We don't have any plans to change the electoral system.
He's saying, we have no plans to change the electoral system. You just brought in voter ID. Voter ID that literally tens of thousands of people got turned away. I've actually got something in my bookmarks here about that specifically. I think Byline Times have been... Actually, it was John Nicholson that was that shared this into my timeline. That local councils have started publishing data on how many voters were turned away because they don't have acceptable ID. In certain constituencies, there have been thousands of people turned away in each one. This could turn theoretical council elections. These figures provided by these two councils are among the highest published so far, but there's clear evidence across England people did not vote due to lack of ID. The stats only tell part of the story too, as some councils employed people outside polling stations who didn't record how many voters were turned away. A fuller picture is expected from the Electoral Commission next month. So we're actually going to have, hopefully, a full briefing on the actual impact, because we also got to remember, like, didn't just affect people who were turned away, who didn't have ID, people who were shooed away from the people outside the polling stations weren't even recorded in the first place. There's also a third group of people, which is people who didn't even bother voting at all because they knew they couldn't vote because they didn't have the ID. So this is someone saying, we're not going to change the vote to make it easier for people to vote. But we are going to make it, we have already changed it to make it harder. He's such a lying shitbag.
And again, what he's actually doing, to put that in another, to make that clear, he's reopening the Brexit settlement. This is a settlement we have made with EU countries to have reciprocal arrangements. So British citizens abroad are able to vote in, for example, the local elections, say, in Spain, and the same here. What he plans to do is actually reopen the Brexit settlement. So what else will he reopen? The Windsor framework, the cooperation agreement with Europe, this again.
I mean, it's very clear that he's not doing any of that, right? If there's one thing that we can trust Keir Starmer on, it's his position on Brexit, which is obviously a pathetic one, spineless one. But at least one that I can understand the utility of, right? If you believe that everyone to your left or anyone to your liberal side of the conservative position that he now admits that he takes, more on that story later, then you know that you don't have to do anything about Brexit. You don't have to renegotiate any of Brexit because all the Brexiteers, the FBP people, will all vote for you anyway. And I also believe that, relitigating Brexit now is going to be difficult politically and also diplomatically. But something as simple as opening up votes to a certain group of people based upon their settled status from the European Union is not relitigating the entirety of the Brexit deal. That's not a carte blanche to then break up the Windsor framework, as Grant Shapps says. These things are completely unrelated as to our future diplomatic relationship with the EU more generally, and the rights that EU citizens with settled status have when they're in the UK, or previous EU citizens, I guess. So that's not what's being said here, Grant. I can't believe I'm defending Keir Starmer here.
Is Keir Starmer doing whatever he thinks is practical to do at that moment in time? He doesn't have fundamental ideas that he relies on. As I say, he stood on one platform. He's now shifting to a different platform, and he'll do the same with reopening Brexit.
It's clear that you want to...
And also, I can make the argument for 16-year-olds getting the vote outside of whether or not it's going to be good for the left or not. And that is that both parties, actually, what's incredible is that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are both running on platforms that basically offer nothing to young people, right? What are young people getting out of either party that's consistently lurched away from everything that they stand for, all of their political positions, all of their ideological positions, and all of their material interests, right? Sure, Labour may be throwing them some crumbs, but is that really the kind of macroeconomic change that we need to properly make sure that the lives of young people are boosted, which will have to come at the expense of older people? I'm sorry sorry, you cannot have it both ways. There's only so much resources to go around, and it's being hoarded by people of the older generation. I'm sorry, but that's true. Whether deliberately or whether accidentally, that is how the resources and the material wealth of our country has been divided. The majority of it is in the hands of the older generation. That's going to have to shift eventually. And there's none of this Liz Truss growing the pie type shit. It's gonna wash with me, unfortunately. That's going to have to change. And the only way that's going to change is if the electoral system has more weighting towards young people to make it fairer. Because at the moment, the reason why older people have the largest share of our material wealth in our society is because the electoral calculus is very much swayed within their favour. Firstly, because they vote more. Secondly, because they're a larger cohort. And thirdly, because they are the ones who have the most deciding power when it comes to the demographics of each constituency. So the easiest way to redress that balance is by enfranchising the vote to more younger people, so they have a larger proportion of the vote within certain demographic constituencies that are mainly made by old people, making their cohort larger to make it equal to the size of the older generations who control the electoral calculus. Those are the two. That's what you can do, and that's why I believe that there is a utilitarian case outside of party politic electioneering on why 16 and 17-year-olds should be given the right to vote. And I think that that's really good that Labour are proposing that, unironically. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. It does help out the channel and the algorithm. And if you click the bell notification icon, it will let you know when I go live and when I upload videos. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my handle is @NoJusticeMTG, and that is Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. If you want to support my channel in a more financial manner, you can do so by becoming a member for just 99p, by super chatting, or by supporting me on Patreon, with the link is in the description of this video. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next segment.